Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Reap the Spoils. I'm Mark Sullivan.
I'm Delilah Lugo.
And I'm Jason Kwasnicki.
And Delilah, we're talking about a video game today. What is that video game?
A Plague Tale Requiem.
After a year almost of us promising that, yeah, we're finally talking about a Plague Tale Requiem. Reap the Spoils is a roughly monthly Spoilercast podcast where we pick a video game or a video game related piece of media. I now have to say that after our Last of Us HBO
one
episode.
episode.
Yeah, because of one episode has made my process change. We pick a video game or video game related media. We play it or experience it in whatever intended way it's to be experienced, and then we come here and we talk about it. We spoil the whole thing, from the story to the gameplay to whatever else. We just kind of like talk out our feelings. We don't bottle things in here at Reap the Spoils. We let it all out.
No, you can't bottle me, unfortunately.
Can't put that genie back in its bottle, that's for sure. So if you have not played A Plague Tale Requiem, I highly recommend that you pause this episode, go play that video game, and then come back and press play and listen to us spoil the hell out of it. We're also probably going to spoil since A Plague Tale Requiem is a sequel to A Plague Tale Innocence. We're probably going to be spoiling the end, at least, of Innocence, because this is a direct continuation. Probably won't talk about it much because I feel like there's not a ton that needs to be talked about with when it relates to that game. But if you haven't played either of them, I suggest you go do that. And also listen to our episode on A Plague Tale Innocence, which was recorded, I want to say, in 2020.
Sounds right.
It
Yeah.
was around I think we did that pretty close to when it came
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, well, we did it. I remember we did it shortly after the beginning of COVID because it was a little too on the nose that we were playing a game about a
Yeah.
plague, right at the beginning of a global pandemic.
Oh, I think that's right. I remember. I thought we were like afraid of if we had certain words. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you haven't listened to that episode, go listen to it. I meant to listen to it before this episode, and I just didn't have the time, so I don't remember what my opinions were at the time of that game. We might talk a little bit about my opinions now of that game and everyone else's opinions, not just mine. So yeah, that's kind of all I've got to preface this episode with. Are we ready
Yes.
Let's
for a
do it.
history lesson? Okay, you guys already know what's coming. This is a really brief history lesson. So Plague Tale Requiem was developed by Asobo Studio. The first game, Plague Tale Innocence, released in May 2019. So this one, coming out in late 2020, had about like a little over a 3-year development cycle. The game, or A Plague Tale Requiem, was revealed during Microsoft's E3 2021 Games Showcase. Can't really say press conference anymore because, well, at least not in that year. Everything was kind of digital. So it was revealed then, announced right off the bat, coming day one to Game Pass. All the Game Pass subscribers, shout hooray! It's how I played it the first time I played it. It eventually released on October 18th, 2022 for the Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, PC, and the Switch. Exclusively via cloud streaming, though.
Of course.
I genuinely wonder what that experience is like on any of these games, but I'm not about to pay full price for a game where I have to cloud stream it to play
Definitely not.
Yeah.
exclusively, that's just not an experience I'm willing to
No bueno.
subject
Yeah.
myself to. Anyway, that's the end of our history lesson. Told you it was brief. It's a short one.
Very beautiful.
Thank you. It's very kind of you to
A
say.
succinct analysis of
Yes, very good, very good.
of the historical narrative behind Plague Tale Requiem. So
Yeah.
let's get into the game.
Yeah, I really didn't see a ton of like, interesting data about this game's development, other than, just like things about them consulting online resources and a doctor in medieval history to really get the setting and location right. And
Oof. I didn't know that. It's actually interesting you bring that up because there were some little jabs, like not like not that they like impact my feelings on like the gameplay of the story, but
Yeah.
there were some historical discrepancies that, as a history buff, I
Well,
was like, oof.
to be fair, going ahead and pinning the bubonic plague on some mystical,
Well, that's just
um,
historical fiction. Like, yeah, you're
right.
gonna
I
do.
know, I
I'm
know.
talking about more like timeline things,
Okay.
um,
Well,
and background info that isn't too important. But because I'm me, I notice it.
yeah. Well, that all being said, are we ready to dive into spoiler territory?
Yeah, are we going right into the ending?
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and say this is your last chance if you haven't played this game, or in a sense, I suggest you pause, go play those games, then come back and listen to this episode. Okay, let's go right into the ending, I guess. Um, well, I do we want to go right into the ending? I feel like there's one thing I kind of want to talk about first and foremost, and that was this whole parallel they tried to draw with Basilius and Aelia, between the two of them and
Mm-hmm.
Amicia and Hugo, which I actually found to be probably the most interesting thing about this game's story.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it gave more context into how the macula works and how it picks its people and how there's some parallel between like the macula person and the protector and all that. And it created this mystery like, oh, we're going to learn more about this.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do.
Yeah, we do. And I mostly find it interesting that like I don't know. I guess um every major plague that was theorized or historically believed to be spread by rats is caused by this thing. So the Justinian plague was the one that they contrived for Alien or Basilius specifically, and Aelia being the protector of Basilius, similar to Amicia being Hugo's protector. I did find that that whole angle genuinely interesting. What I was pretty let down by was the angle that first of all, Lacuna. Let's talk a little bit about Lacuna. Um and how that island was a kind of a hub for the order. It was a big headquarters for the order, and they had all this imagery everywhere of this of a child, you know, and meant to be a macula carrier, and Basilius was kind of imprisoned there and all that. They have all this history for the order and for the macula. And I really liked the angle that these other people just came in and settled there and saw this imagery and made up their own myth about it, and it has its own mythology to these laymen's that don't know anything about the order, don't know anything about the macula. I was pretty let down by the fact that Victor just made all that up. The whole thing with the Child of Embers, it was all just a fiction that he created. I thought
Mm-hmm.
that was really lame because I really liked the idea of taking those images and taking those ideas and morphing them into something that fit these other settlers' narrative. Um, I thought it was really lame that just one guy just made it up for one person and it spread into an entire culture. I think
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's
and
really
from
silly.
from a historical perspective, keep in mind this game takes place. I think it says specifically like 1360s, 1370s,
1349.
13 1349. That opens the door to so many more questions. Anyway, I'm not going to get into them. Historic, like the Hundred Years' War, isn't. Anyway, never mind. But anyway, what I was trying to get at is it does, from a historical perspective, playing nicely to the fact that Europe is transitioning at that period. It's almost fully there, but it's still in the transition process from paganism to Christianity.
Hmm.
Um, so it like the solstice that comes from pagan tradition, but it was taken into Christian tradition. A lot of pagan things were absorbed into Christian tradition. Um,
And
so that is a cool element.
I do think when you arrive at Lacuna, Arno even points out, like when they're talking about the Child of Embers, he even
Yeah, they
says
do,
like
yeah,
it's a pagan deity.
yeah,
Um, so
Refresh my memory because it's been a year since I played it.
yeah,
Lacuna is the weird cultist looking place.
it's the
yes,
island that Hugo sees in his dreams. I also liked the angle. I like the angle that I still think I remember my opinion on this from the first game. I still think the macula is just a very it's a strange power. I don't know. I find the whole angle that like
Well,
the carrier is able to control rats to just be such an odd thing to apply to historical fiction. But
yeah, there's a lot of odd things. Like I'm just listening to you guys and your thoughts on like the whole the expanded history of the order and all this and how much you enjoy it. And on a surface level, I would be inclined to agree,
mhm.
like connecting it to the Justinian plague. The problem is just that for the rules that are set up in this historical fiction and the plot as it's set up in the beginning, for me, it just opened the door to way more questions that showed how dysfunctional the plot as a whole was.
Well,
Like for example, if the order knows all this, a lot of stuff that happens early on just doesn't make sense.
like what?
Like if the order knows, so I was confused very early on because you meet with a member of the order who starts treating Hugo in I forget which town you go to. It's not Marseille. Marseille is at the end.
It's
Um
isn't it Provence?
Provence, maybe it's Provence. Provence might just be the region that Count Victor is Count of. Doesn't matter. You go to a town in the beginning,
Yeah.
and this guy, I thought he had said that it's likely the child would die through the treatment, but like they're trying to treat him.
Yeah.
But then later on, Amicia seems to imply that he said that they're going to kill Hugo or Hugo is doomed. And then when you get to the ending and you learn this history of the Order, so the Order knows that the child is going to go crazy and cause a plague, which brings up the whole question: why wouldn't you just kill the child to begin with?
Oh.
And why are you trying to treat the child? And
Well,
and how does the mother not know about this? There's apparent, and it also brings up the question of, so Hugo sees this place in a dream, and Amicia just seems to take it as, okay, this is the answer because she saw a picture of an island in the guy's house in the beginning, but she doesn't know what the island looks like, and there's no scene with Hugo saying that's the
well,
island from my dreams.
she does see the image in his lab. I think his name was Maester Vaudin.
Vaudin, yes, that's his
Yeah.
name.
She sees the image, and Hugo was describing it to her. Like she put two and two together and told him, like, "Hey, this was in his lab. You saw it was like the
It
two-toothed
still doesn't
island."
excuse how flimsy an inciting incident
Sure,
that is.
I don't necessarily disagree with that.
And it
What
also confused me as to why Amicia is so against the order, because my understanding was that Vaudin said, we'll try to treat him, but it's very unlikely he'll live. But apparently,
well,
no, what he
I
said is he was doomed.
I think what they're trying to set up there is for the Order to really come across as a lot more antagonistic than they might seem on the surface,
Right. They're
where
trying
they
they're trying
don't.
to make her seem childish and impetuous,
But
yeah.
not only that, like when they say like we'll try to treat Hugo, we will try to help him, we'll try to save him or whatever. They don't want to treat him. They want to run tests on him. They want to
Right.
examine him. And that's kind of what you find out in that order facility building whatever when you get to Lacuna and they're in the robes, they're sneaking around with the masks on as Emily and Victor are doing their weird ritual thing or whatever. You come across like that lab where you can examine a lot of things and you find like that's where they were that's where Basilius and Aelia were living. But were they living? They were more like prisoners.
Hmm.
Right. No, I completely get that. That's why it opens up the question: why are you letting this kid live if you know what
Because they
the
want to run
ultimate
tests.
outcome? But
Because they want
so
to.
did so did the Byzantine order before the Justinian plague. You get what
No,
I'm saying? Like,
right, but I'm saying they probably didn't come to anything conclusive in that time. Aelia started rebelling against them, and so what did they do? They imprisoned Basilius. They imprisoned Basilius to try and cut Aelia off, and she died trying to fight her way down there.
right.
And he did the same thing that Hugo does at the end. thinking Aelia, he's separated from Aelia, he gave himself over to the macula and he
And
became one with it, which is
and
just like
and,
that in and
and
of
look,
itself is a whole other can of worms
yeah,
that we'll get to.
and look, like maybe it's just me, but it just strains credulity that this highly scientific order um
Well, also
knows
remember,
what the child is capable of and knows what the end game is, even if they try to do these experiments. So just end it
I
before
mean,
he topples the civilization. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
I'm just gonna say the hubris of man, Jason. It has no bounds.
I know, I know. It
And
just strains
also,
credulity for me.
and also keep in mind, like highly scientific for the
For the time, yeah,
1300s, for the
it's alchemy. Yeah,
1300s, like
I know. It's just
um
still, it's like you got to balance. Like, I know in many ways they try to go for historical realism with these games, but at the
yeah.
same time, you're doing essentially historical fantasy. So
Yeah.
where you draw that line starts to become
Especially when you get to, well, I mean, I can't even say especially when you get to the latter chapters where
yes.
Hugo gives himself over and End of Evangelion with rats begins.
And when you start getting
Um
into like the geography of where Marseille is, and like if you're actually thinking about, all right, they're
I
in an
mean that
island in the
whole
Mediterranean to
that
Marseille.
whole that whole final chapter just feels like a fever dream.
Yeah,
Um
Yeah.
like just absolute like I say, it's like End of Evangelion but with rats. Um
Honestly, the end of Plague Tale: Innocence also felt like a fever dream. Like, I was totally into, like, this is a plague, this is happening. And when I found out that this is all because of this kid and he has these powers and people wanted that power too, like that priest guy, the last boss or
y-
whatever, I was
yeah,
just
but
like, ah, like, I didn't like it. I remember not liking that
I agree.
direction.
I agree with you,
but this
Delilah, and I
takes it
think
to a whole new
yeah.
level.
So, Delilah, I agree with what you're saying. Um, the thing about the first game, from what I remember, is that there was a core character story that kind of anchored it, and even when it got to that point of disbelief, like I was willing to overlook it because
Right.
I was enjoying like the brother sister relationship and how that matriculated.
they
Here,
the first
there
one
is no coherent plot or character arc to anchor pretty much anything down. So I just feel like we're going all over the place now.
Yeah.
um just to go back to talking through the ending. I wanted to start with Basilius and Aelia, but I think now it's maybe important to talk about like the, I guess, the two halves of the like the ending, the final few chapters, where you face down Victor with the help of
Arnold.
Arno. So I want to talk about Arno for a bit. Um I don't know about you guys. The first few chapters, I kind of missed the actual definitive point where he was introduced, and then when Amici gets knocked out, wakes up to find him with them, I didn't even know who he was,
Yep.
and they don't, and Amicia never really acknowledges, hey, you're the guy that chased me in chapter 5 and smacked me on the head with your sword, or the butt of your sword.
Yep.
Like, I thought maybe he was a guy in an earlier chapter, and then that was the same guy that chased her in chapter 5. No, he really was just introduced with a helmet on in chapter 5,
He's
and
essentially the villain for the first, 4 or 5 chapters.
no, he's just the villain for one
Or
chapter,
one
and
chapter.
and
Yeah, not
is
even,
never
yeah.
given like a proper introduction until he's your ally.
Which is made even more confusing because he and his men are wearing the same livery as the
Right.
ultimate villain. So it's like, who is who's in command?
Well, it's not even that. It's that when you're sticking to like some form of historical fiction, and you're, I guess, trying to aim for some realistic character design.
Just real quick, for people listening who don't know what livery is, it's just the surcoats, the colors, like on your armor. So you might wear like cloth over your armor that has colors of whatever house or whatever you're under. That's what livery is.
Thank
Continue, Mark.
you.
Thank you.
Special thank you to our history consultant, Jason
Which is
Kwasnicki.
people
Thank you
might
for
not know
joining
what
the
we're
show.
talking about. Yeah.
Just
Um, yeah,
Googling.
when you aim for like a realistic approach, I guess, to like a historical design or something, you do lose a little bit of identity in terms of, again, he was a character in medieval armor, with no major discerning traits or distinctive traits that made it so that when we see him without his helmet, we immediately know who he is.
Right.
Um, Even his voice, like you get to know it shortly after, because he does have a kind of a distinct voice, kind of a distinct way of speaking. It's like we don't hear him talk a whole bunch before that point. So again, I had no clue who he was until I really until well no, I knew who he was after he was reintroduced. I didn't know the entirety of when he was introduced earlier until I replayed the game and found that his real first introduction was literally like a chapter or two before, and it was just for a brief section.
Mhm.
Um
I think the idea was that when Amicia has her temper tantrum and you kill all those guys early on, those were supposed to be his men, I think, and that's why he comes after you and is introduced that
I
way.
think they were just men of
Or
under
maybe
Count Victor.
he says something about you killed my men or something, and Lucas says they were on. Lucas, aka Basil Exposition, says that that they're Arno's men, as if that's supposed to mean something to you.
Yeah, it's right. And it kind of doesn't.
I get
Um
the sense that that character was just introduced for gameplay set pieces, kind of like
mm,
how the
Yes,
other kid was introduced in the Plague Tale, the big guy, the tanky
yeah.
guy. Although his story I felt was better, because he's just another kid like surviving, sort of.
right. It
I felt like
paralleled the main story. Yeah,
yeah, he was like that tanky, strong character that you can like sick on enemies to create like a variety of gameplay elements.
Roderick.
Roderick, there you
Yeah,
go.
I was trying to remember his name.
yeah. It introduced a melee option that was sorely lacking in the actual gameplay, but we'll get there after we talk the
Well,
story.
yeah, yeah, we'll talk about that later. I actually really liked Arno when he started actually having a character dynamic. It was a different dynamic, right? You have a very careful alliance there between like Amicia hates his guts and she's gone off her rocker in terms of stability. Um and he's obviously using Hugo once he realizes, oh shit, you can power the rats. Cool. I want you to make them eat this guy. Um and he I did it did kind of drive me crazy every time he called Hugo Shorty. I did not think that was a particularly good nickname for him to be laying out there every two sentences. Um but I liked his rapport with Amicia, and I liked how that alliance kind of progressed up until obviously he gets imprisoned and then is gone for 5 chapters.
Yeah.
Um, I think I think rescuing him was like bound to happen. What did you guys think of his redemption at the end? Kind of sacrificing himself and letting go a little bit of his ego and need for revenge to give Amicia the shot, so to speak. Did you guys enjoy that moment or that fight in general?
Yeah, I think I enjoyed the fight in the moment for sure. Was it like really substantial to the story? Probably not, but
Yeah. Well, it was to it was in the sense that it gave you the chance to defeat the surface level villain,
right.
which was Count Victor. And
Right. Yeah.
Amicia, and also for Amicia to kind of get her own revenge. Uh,
I mean, you kind of just alluded to it. The guy disappears for like a third of the game. We don't ever really get a full explanation as to why he wants to kill the count in the first place. It has something to do with killing his men, I guess. I don't
I
know,
think there's something that suggests that it's
but
because of Victor that his son was killed.
I
But
didn't
again,
even hear that.
that's not something that's particularly well
Yeah,
explored.
and it
His
doesn't even make
motivations are
sense
not very
because,
clear.
as we said earlier, his men and Victor's men wear the same colors. Why were they at odds? I don't know. We
Well,
don't know.
I think if I remember correctly, Arno was once under
A,
Victor
a knight, yeah,
and defected and became a mercenary
yeah.
seeking revenge against him.
But at the end of the day, we just didn't get enough time with the character for me to
No,
ever really care about him.
I agree with that. I think I feel like he was a good character with a good with a good
He was well
uh
acted.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And he had a good he interacted well with the characters, but he definitely needed more substantial development, more time, and more exploration of his backstory to really shine as a side character.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is why it kind of baffled me that he was gone so long.
Well, it's also
Is
even I think what even goes a little what oh, sorry, Jason, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you didn't. I was about to ramble into another sec because the reason he's gone is because the game needs, for plot and mechanical purposes, you to have this other character
Well,
to
yeah,
do set pieces. That's why he's gone so
and this
long.
is where I was just about to
Yeah,
go. I feel like replacing him with Sophia, while Sophia is a perfectly fine character, it's not like she has much more to give than Arno would have.
she's my favorite
Um
character in the game because her dialogue literally breaks the fourth wall and points out how dumb what's going on is. Like
Yeah.
they dig up at one point under a tile something from Amelia, and Amelia just says, "Oh, this is the solution. It's right here." And the character, this Sophia, literally just says, "Oh, well, I guess that's just another day in your life. You found a map under a floor tile, and it's the right way. Let's go." And Sophia literally says at one point, "I like you guys. I don't know why. It's stupid, but I do." This is
Yeah.
literal dialogue from the game, just pointing out that these things need to happen for the plot to happen.
Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
I also really like Sophia for the same reason. She was like kind of some levity and also like sarcastic as shit and a badass. But she for me the only purpose she served besides set pieces is that she was the only person that really acknowledged that, oh, these are kids and maybe I should be helping kids because they're alone, you know?
Yeah.
There's not many people like that. Everyone's like after these two seemingly innocent children, and we understand why they're after Hugo, but like if you don't know that, like why are you after them? You know? Some weird shit going on in this world. Like everybody's fucked. She seemed like the only person that had her screws in right.
Yeah. I think like she was somewhat of a foil to Arno. You have this like again, a shaky alliance who becomes very combative towards you at one point, and then he immediately gets replaced by someone who wants to help you. Um and but like doesn't really have much to say or much motivation at all. By so just contrasting that with Arno, who has a motivation, has a lot to say and to explore. I do find it interesting that this game, more than the first one, largely focuses on adult companions, whereas the first one was almost entirely other kids.
Yeah.
Um, we alluded to that a little bit or a little bit ago, but I don't think there was a single adult companion other than your mother very briefly in the first one.
Yep. That
Which is
sounds right.
actually, I think, one of the reasons why I actually liked the first one so much better, just because it kept that tone of these are kids in the middle of the Hundred Years War, well, not in the middle, the beginning of the Hundred Years War,
Yeah.
plus the Inquisitions, plus the plague, and that's the other thing is that the Inquisition as not just the villain in the form of the main guy in the first one, but just the Inquisition as a force that's just ever omnipresent throughout the country, as all these faceless guys going around killing people, served as a much better antagonist than what we got here.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, moving on to kind of the I guess the secondary or the main I would say the main, the ultimate, but also kind of the afterthought antagonist. I guess let's talk about Hugo giving himself over to the macula and kicking off that whole as I keep calling it, the End of Evangelion sequence, where Marseille kind of just becomes overtaken with rats and destroyed, and you're running through with Lucas. Um, what did you guys think of?
Visually, it was awesome.
Yeah,
Visually, I was like, this is so cool.
it's funny. One of the development tidbits I could find or just saw, and I remember reading this when the press cycle for this game was happening last year. Was that part of the reason this game was, I guess now current gen only, was to just aid in their ability to render the rats and they were able to render like 300,000 rats at once, and you could really see that in that final sequence where
Yeah.
you're running down the hill cover to cover, and waves of rats are just like barreling toward you. Um,
Yeah.
I think this game needed more interesting puzzles like that last section, although that last section also just kind of lays it out for you as you just keep
Right.
failing. Um,
Yeah.
I mean,
For
that's what.
sure.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Next, that's where I thought the gameplay. My favorite gameplay moments were in tombs or places solving puzzles, not necessarily the stealth sections. So I agree with that.
I
That
mean, let's
making it
face
more
it,
of a puzzle.
there's two major puzzles in this game where you just follow where statues are facing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the first one can hardly even be called a puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's only really this last one that kind of is a puzzle. But ultimately, it's just so, I don't know, weirdly like super esoteric, and just the whole final sequence of, or not esoteric, that's not the word I'm looking for. Um, but you see what I'm trying to say. Like, where are you in that moment? Like, are you in Marseille? It just feels very
It felt like you went to another
psychological.
dimension.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it is. It is. I think the implication they were going for was that in her head, she knows ultimately what she has to do, which gets us to the end, kill Hugo. But that's kind of what she's been struggling against the entire game. I think that's what they were aiming for. It's just
Yeah, but I
it
feel like it
feels
doesn't work.
like it doesn't work because it's a conclusion. It's the conclusion that I thought from the beginning of this game was going to be the ending of the third game when they came out with it, but it doesn't fit because, as we were kind of talking about, Mark, before the show, this feels like
Yeah.
a second and third act smushed together.
Yeah, because early on, like they start this. There's that mission where, or chapter where Amicia and Lucas are trying to find the one specific flower. I can't remember off the top of my head which one it was. It was a purple flower. They were trying to find it, and Lucas gets captured. She saves him, and then she just, instead of running away, she just keeps slaughtering dudes until they inevitably get captured and imprisoned. And like, this game just sets up throughout the whole game that Amicia is just becoming more and more violent, more and more bloodthirsty. And I
Well,
guess the whole point of that was she's willing to do anything and everything it takes to protect Hugo. Um, and in a way, it's kind of poetic that at the end she's the one that has to put him down.
right.
But like, overall, that whole theme of her becoming increasingly violent, like, it never really causes her downfall, other than
Right.
that very early moment where she gets captured, and it's not like there's a ton of consequence to
She
it.
doesn't get her hand cut off and find out that Darth Vader's her father. She
There
doesn't
we
have
go.
what the moment that you need at the end of the second act for the hero to have a failure that they learn from going into the third act.
Right.
Not to mention that kind of goal that they kind of foreshadowed in the beginning of her becoming more rebellious, more impetuous, more reckless, kind of is uneven throughout the game. Like, you just mentioned her going through and just slaughtering a bunch of guys, but just minutes before that, she has a
Like a
panic
tender
attack
moment.
that literally
Oh.
causes her to not be able to move. And
Yeah.
it's like it's ping ponging between all these different emotional states for her. She just comes off throughout the game as stupid and emotionally unstable, rather than, a good person, but she's reckless or is ignorant to facts. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. Like, if anything, maybe what they were trying to go for was her failure was her, maybe they were trying to go for the idea that her failure was her mother getting killed during, like, on Lacuna, but that wasn't really,
she's
that was completely out
another
of her
problem.
control.
That, and her mother's barely in the game,
Yeah.
and when she is, she's not a character. She's like a vacant face.
She's
That
never had a good relationship with her mom anyway.
Well, that's the thing, right?
But in this, but that's yeah, she didn't have any relationship with her in this game.
Yes, that's the
At
problem.
least in
Is
the first one, there was some animosity. Here, there
you
was just nothing.
you would think that the mother would be way more involved in this story if it's going to be about Amicia rebelling. That a her mother would be a primary antagonistic force, that not necessarily like a villain, but like by the end of the game, she's kind of learned her lesson that her mom maybe knows some things that she doesn't. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
she kind of becomes more mature, but we never really get that. And within minutes of the mom being reintroduced to the story, she's killed off, like you said, Mark.
I feel like I just wanted them to lean into Amicia just being like bloodthirsty and
So did I,
kind of
yeah.
like lost her mind completely. But she kept just going back to this like kind girl who was like nice and stuff like that. And then she would have these moments, which, you know, I expected her to kind of go off the rails in the beginning of A Plague Tale: Innocence. I mean, halfway through, you know, having to protect her brother alone with like other kids, you know, not really having lost her mom, like saw her mom die. Like she went through a lot of trauma. Why is she not fully gone, you know?
Right.
She's just going back and forth. Sometimes she's chill, and then immediately she's like going through a moment.
Yeah. Going through a moment. That's putting it lightly. So okay, back to this having to kill Hugo thing. I did like if I haven't seen this myself, but I did read that if you just sit there and don't do it, Lucas will eventually kill him for you.
Oh,
Oh
really?
yeah.
Yeah. Which is interesting. I like that they've kind of forced you to do it through gameplay, and it's something that you kind of they don't tell you like hold R2.
Right, yeah, that would have taken out a
I was a
moment
bit
completely.
confused by that on a couple occasions. Not just that, but also the boss fight with Victor. I actually died a few times because I was like, the game's not letting me move. What the fuck is going on? I thought it was a glitch. I didn't realize that
Oh,
you're limited and you're supposed to do that one option. Yeah.
yeah. It's yeah, combining cinematic with gameplay like sometimes it works, and I feel like the times here it did work for me. Um
I definitely feel like this ending was super strong for a game whose journey maybe was a bit too long and a bit
yeah.
messy. But I felt like this conclusion really like solidified everything that they had been going through, and it was obvious that this would be the conclusion, but the way that they executed it with having you do it with her sling, like the very first weapon that you used in the first game, is super impactful. And like you're killing a kid, you're killing your brother that you've been holding his hand throughout like two games at this point. So it just like really resonated with me, and it's why I liked the game a lot because the journey wasn't great, but the ending was super strong.
And especially if you're coming into Requiem from Innocence, like you have built some sort of, if you're playing the sequel to the game, clearly you liked the first game enough, so you have some investment in those characters, and to end the second one with one of those characters dying at your hand, it is impactful, and I do think it was a pretty strong ending, one that I definitely didn't expect them to do. It's a I feel like it's a bit of a controversial is not the right word, but
It's
touchy
bold.
subject. Yeah,
Yeah.
bold. I would say bold. I agree with you. It was a bold way to end the game. I honestly thought that the one that going into this game last year when it came out, going into it, I thought Amicia was going to be the one to die because that would have given her a failure. Um,
Yeah.
the ultimate failure, death.
Well,
Yeah.
there were multiple times in this game where I agree with Delilah that in theory the ending is good, and it's actually like Delilah says, it's predictable. It's kind of what I thought would happen.
Hmm.
The problem is like Delilah said, I don't think the game earned it.
Yeah.
And going to what you just said, Mark, about Amicia's failure, there were multiple times when I thought she was gonna fail, like getting slashed across the gut and the leg and the shoulder with a sword, getting
Yeah.
shot with an
To be
arrow.
to be clear, what to be clear, she does have failures, but she doesn't really have any consequences for
Consequences
those
of the
failures.
yes.
So that kind of negates any sort of impact that those could have, you know? To bring Star Wars back into it, like Luke losing his hand and finding out Darth Vader is his father, that's a good failure that leads to some consequence.
And his friend gets captured and frozen in carbonite and taken
Yeah.
by Jabba the Hutt. Yeah.
Rey shooting Sith lightning out of her fingers to kill Chewbacca, and then the next scene you find out no, he's fine. That's a failure that does not lead to any consequence. So we just had a good example and a bad example. So Amicia, she gets like bonked on. She gets captured and imprisoned, and she's the whole next thing is she's immediately out. She gets bonked on the head, and there's what you walk slowly for a little bit in the next chapter because she has a headache. She gets slashed in the gut, and the consequence from that is just watching her be in pain in a cutscene. Um, she gets thrown overboard on a boat. The very next thing is a boss fight against Victor. It's like there's not really any consequence to anything that happens to her.
Yeah, which again raises a lot of questions about. I would love to know more about the development of this game and like were they anticipating making another one at some point and then like halfway through they realized that wasn't going to happen, so they tried to cram, the third act into this game.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It'd be interesting to know.
Well, let's talk about the epilogue, where Amicia meets up with Sophia I think a year later. And
Mhm.
her whole plan is to go and seek out the next macula carrier so that she can do what Aelia did and guide them toward whatever, I guess toward fixing the
Toward
macula.
killing the
Not
next
really,
macula
Killing the
carrier.
kid.
or at least giving them the information, right? I guess you'd think that just writing it all down and putting it in a place that they can find it
Hey,
would be enough,
kill
but
this kid now before an entire country is fucking destroyed.
yeah. And there, I'm not sure what the logic is there. Also, because the game kind of insinuates that in the history of this, again, historical fiction, the last Macula character was Basilius, and that was what, 5th century.
Yeah.
Right.
So is she gonna leave clues behind?
I
And
guess that's
what
what
are the
they're
clues
implying.
leading
Yeah.
to? Yeah, like what are the clues leading to? And we'll talk about the post credit scene in a minute. But like, she doesn't. What is she planning to do? How is she planning to guide them? I guess she's got to be the next puzzle master to set up to set up all the set pieces for whatever next game we get. I don't know.
Yeah, but like, what did she do differently? She just killed him before he gave into the macula and killed her and everyone. No,
Yeah,
I
what
mean,
what lessons were
basically.
learned?
She didn't fail. She did exactly what was necessary. Like,
Yeah, I mean, she
eh,
failed in protecting him, but like, she just couldn't. There was nothing she could do.
but that's the thing is that like, why is there even a protector? Like, apparently, the ultimate end for all of these carriers is that they become medieval nuclear bombs. This is my
um,
point: is that if there was never any avenue for him to get better to begin with, what is the point of any of what the Order is doing other than, like Mark said, to try to learn something? I
I
guess.
wonder if she thinks that there's a way for a macula user to control what happens. Yeah, like
like in
so
terms
that
of in terms of the sickness, have like more control over the rats and more
yeah,
control
like
over
because
the
it's
plague itself.
emotionally like he gave into his emotions, right? He was really emotional. His mom died,
Well,
and that's when he went
Well,
crazy. But
he thought Amicia died too, which was what sent him over
yes,
the edge.
right,
but here's the problem with that: because when you're actually inside that like ether realm, whatever, where I guess you're supposed to be inside your own head as Amicia, but then um, the problem that's created is that yes, like you guys said, this was all triggered. Giving into the macula was triggered by emotion, but then in the dialogue with Hugo, Hugo was telling her she's proud of him and that he basically says he realizes he needed it. He says even earlier before any of this happens, when the two characters together, that his life's not, he's prepared to die essentially because he knows, or at least has a feeling at that point, that that's ultimately what is going to have to happen, and
yeah,
he's okay with it because it will save other lives. So like Hugo has come to terms with that. So
yeah,
again, it just raises the question of like, why is the Order going through any of this other than, as Mark postulated, research, when they know how it ends, so you can end it before that happens.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think the Order aside, like I genuinely think the Order is just trying to research, document, and test.
That no,
They're
I think
trying
I
to
get that.
make
Yeah,
I
they're
think the
trying to
bigger
make the next Macula user the Resident Evil boss.
basically, they're like medieval Umbrella Corps. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
like what the fuck? Like it just
the
it.
next Plague Tale is gonna star Oswald Spencer.
I'm sorry, just the way this all like comes together, it just makes everybody look stupid. Like
Well,
everybody.
so what I want to say is like just going back to Amicia and her motivation there at the end is like if the Order is just the Order's whole goal, if the Order's whole goal is to just find a macula user, test an experiment, and research them or whatever, if that's their whole goal and it's I guess to contain the plague, well, what does Amicia plan to do differently or against them other than but because obviously what Aelia didn't really succeed. um Basilius was imprisoned, she was killed, and like yeah, sure, she left clues for them to follow, but also did it matter? Because we also find out that the macula led them to Lacuna so that to kind of unleash Hugo even further. Like
Yeah.
that was kind of a realization when you go down that really deep tower and find Basilius imprisoned down there.
I mean,
They
let's be
realized, oh, the macula led us here. It was all a plan to just fuck up Hugo even
yeah, let's
more.
be real. The dream with Lacuna. Let's be real. What it is? It's an excuse to create a plot where they go on a journey. Because if you remove Lacuna and all that, what is it other than the setting and the physical elements of traveling there? What is it really? How does it affect
The
the end of the
driving
story?
motivation, right? They wouldn't know about it or know any significance if it wasn't showing up in Hugo's dreams. Um it's definitely a contrivance. I'm not going to deny that. That the macula was just kind of projecting like, "Ooh, come here, come to this island, you'll be saved." It's definitely a contrivance, but it's used as a motivation for them to have some sort of final destination, you know. Otherwise we're just going to get another game of them running around France trying to survive as things happen to them.
Yeah.
Or you could have a story where the mother actually plays an important role.
Well,
But
there's
then again, yeah,
that's also an option, but you know, we didn't get that. So
exactly. This is what I guess this is just like my ultimate problem with the game is that the plot just feels like it's jumping from place to place with extremely contrived, thin reasons, motives for characters. The characters do stupid things. The bad guy karate chops Hugo, which I openly laughed at when that happened. He literally karate chops
yeah.
him in Armored Knight. Oh my god, I was fucking almost bawling when that happened in laughter. But
Yeah,
um
but it
it
makes
just feels like you're going from place to place because they wanted to have a longer game. I don't know.
yeah, and now they want to carry this through to like a sequel.
yeah, so let's talk about that post-credit scene. Um where it seems to be either like 20th or 21st century, a child in a hospital. You hear what a heart monitor or something in
Yeah,
the background.
and heels.
Huh?
And heels like
Oh yeah, yeah. Yes, you hear the heels of presumably a nurse or doctor
Mhm.
walking, and it does that, you know, musical sting like as you see the black
Yeah.
veins. um So I here's the one thing. This kind of goes into the final question. Um, and here's the one thing I'll say is this being a video game that came out in 2022. I really fucking hope that they're not trying to contrive and further the historical fiction to say that like if there is a presumed third game, I really hope they don't try to pull the macula is responsible for COVID or
Oh
some
god.
stupid
Yeah,
bullshit
no,
like that.
that would be
But that's
terrible.
the fear I have because there's been so many shows or television shows that bring in erroneously bring in COVID as like a plot point, and it's like, no, stop, don't do that.
Mm-mm.
And that's kind of the fear I have with a third game in this series, that especially with that post-credit scene, is that they're gonna come up with some
I
fiction
don't know.
about
I
COVID.
wouldn't worry too much because given the way this game feels like it's rushing towards its end, I think they might have just wanted to work on something else. So I'm not too worried about that.
Well, I don't know, that stinger there. Oh, I don't know. We'll say when maybe we'll talk about that in the final question.
I just took the stinger as like there's always going to be a kid born with the macula
Okay.
that
Yeah.
like realistically should be killed, right there and then once you know it has the macula. Or I mean, I guess we don't know if in the future there's technology that can actually
Well,
cure it, but
I
yeah.
also wonder. If Amicia's goal was to just make sure people kept knowing about it, or finding more information about it. Like, did that reach modern day? And
Right.
there's also no guarantee that's the next macula carrier after Hugo. There could have
Like
been one or two or three in between the time that this game takes place in
it would have
modern
been
day.
far more poignant if like in this fictional alternate history, so in the stinger when we see the baby with the macula obvious signs of it, it
Yeah.
would have been far more poignant to insert a bit of like background dialogue of nurses and doctors talking, and the macula at this point in this alternate history is a treatable disease. You know what I'm saying? Kind of
Yeah, but then you
like
wouldn't
that.
have that creepy audio stinger that makes it seem
Yeah,
like it's a threat.
but what I'm saying, I guess, is it would have been far more salient because the implication would have been that, yeah, uh, to what your point you just said, Amicia began collecting info and passed it on, and it eventually resulted in a cure that made it
Yeah.
so you
Yeah.
didn't have to kill the kid
But I
when they
think
had the
that's
macula.
the thing, though, is I don't think I think they wanted the ending to be very open ended. And if as soon as you add that dialogue, you kind of defeat that purpose.
I mean,
You
it all depends if they want to actually make more of these or if they want to
well,
move on. Yeah,
well,
Am
I
I
think
sick in that I wanted, there's two sets of credits, right? The one that rolls right after you kill Hugo,
yeah,
and the one after that epilogue.
yeah.
I wanted it to just end at them killing Hugo. Like that quiet that they had with like the
No,
sun.
yeah.
I feel
That
like that would have been a more compelling ending
It
than
would
what
have
we got.
been. It 100% would have been, because
yeah,
like that's the last image you see, right? That would have been super powerful. Like,
Yeah.
but instead we get a whole other playable sequence a year later, and it definitely takes away a lot of that impact.
Yeah.
Because they could, you'd be left at wondering, like, well, what happened to Amicia
Mm-hmm.
too? She's in this fucking ethereal rat land.
Armageddon. Yeah,
Yeah, like,
Mm-hmm.
did she make it out? Did Lucas make it out? Sophia? Did any of them live? And you
Yeah.
and you immediately find out the answer to those questions 2 minutes later.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lucas is traveling. He's finishing his alchemy training. Sophia's here. We're going on a journey. Let's go.
Yeah,
That's it.
I'm not a fan of these like time jump like epilogue
Where are
gameplay
they now?
segments.
Kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing them more and more. I don't know. I can't pinpoint the specific game I mean, I can, but I don't want to spoil those games. But they are Rockstar games that did these. But there was actually a poignant story point to doing them. And
Yeah.
then other games, it's not like too often, but I've seen more story-driven games start to do these things.
They
But they
they
don't
weren't
have a
so much
point.
epilogues that showed where characters were, but gave closure to their
Yes,
stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
yes.
Um.
That's the best
Yeah.
we can do without spoiling the games. Go play them
Mm-hmm.
if you want to know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I hear you. Delilah, I couldn't agree more with you about end it on throwing that rock, and that's it. That's all we see.
Yeah.
If you wanna continue the story, then do it in another game, but that
Yeah.
would have been a much more powerful ending. Especially with the fact that, like, I don't think there was any music in that short bit of credits
No, it
either.
was quiet.
No.
Yeah. So, like, the impact of that, it's something so small, you'd think it's like nothing, but it really, really does a lot to drive in the impact of an ending.
And I think
Yeah.
Delilah's right because what does the playable section, or it's barely playable, like you just move a little bit, but with Amicia at that end, what does it contribute to anything?
It tells you
Closure. That's
it
it.
just tells you what she's up, it gives you if anything, I guess setup for a presumed next game, or just what she plans to do after. I think it was really
Exactly,
just
exactly. It doesn't contribute anything to the actual story at hand.
No.
I completely agree with. I think we all
Yeah.
agree that it should have just ended like Delilah said.
Yeah, I don't disagree one bit. It was, if anything, it was to further the parallels between Basilius and Aelia and Amicia and Hugo.
Right.
Aelia was trying to leave behind clues and educate people in the future to watch out for the macula, I guess. And try to protect her sibling, family member, whatever their relationship was. I believe they were siblings. Um, I suppose they don't necessarily have to be, but and it was the same thing with Amicia.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Just to further drive that parallel, I guess that was the only real reason.
Yeah.
Maybe they wanted to end on a less somber note, but again, there's nothing wrong with ending on a somber note, especially one as powerful as this.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't know that we have much more to talk about with the story and characters.
Not really, no. I mean, I just felt like overall this game was too long. I like just how bite-sized the first one was, and I think it should have kept that containment. I felt like it tried to do what every other other sequel to a successful game does, which is expand. And
Yeah.
I felt like that took away from it, and I don't know. I was mostly bored until the end.
same. I completely agree with Delilah on this
Well,
one. I playing this felt like a chore, and a lot of that had to do with gameplay, which I guess we'll be getting into shortly.
yeah, I mean,
Um,
let's
Well,
we can
real quick, just
go ahead.
because I didn't get an opportunity to say this, but
Oh
Sophia
boy.
at one point mentions that the ruins looked ancient, like Byzantine, which I don't know if they meant to imply
Oh
that
boy, here we go.
Byzantium wasn't around, but at the year that this takes place, Constantinople doesn't fall for another 100 plus years. The Byzantine Empire, even though it's in decline, is still around. So historical inaccuracy, boom. There are more other ones, but that's the big one that really pissed me off. Anyway, let's move on.
All right, well, maybe let's talk about some of the reasons this game felt like it was a bit of a slog to play through. Yeah, this game definitely suffered from bigger is better.
Hmm.
We had a successful first game. Let's just make another one, but with more stuff, and that doesn't necessarily lead to a better experience. If you want
No.
to hear the other or the most recent example of that, go listen to our episode on Jedi Survivor.
Yes.
Um, but let's talk about the combat, because this game definitely had more of a focus on combat, where the first one kind of had you crafting more things just to get through an area and not so much of a focus on fighting. They definitely enhanced the combat ability that you have in this game. How did
Yeah.
you guys feel about that?
Makes sense from the perspective that Amicia should be stronger because she's been fighting off these big people for a long time. But it was just too long. Like the gameplay sequences, like the set pieces were too long.
They kept making these, they every encounter felt like a combat sandbox,
Yes,
which
and
in theory is pretty cool.
yes. So my main problem is not that they expanded the options, although I do find it weird that knives break in this unit. They should have just given you knife and melee options. So I love stealth sandbox game. I love the Hitman series. I'm a big fan of stealth gameplay. My main problem here is, like you said, Mark, or I'm sorry, like you said, Delilah, these levels are way too big. They're not designed to utilize all the options you have. In fact, they purposely deny you many of the options that you're given. Um, they're extremely frustrating, and if you fail once, you have to start all the way back at the beginning most of the time. And at points, I just found myself running through levels if I could, past enemies to get to the end of them, because I didn't feel like dealing with stealth and going
This
through
is
it.
So this is where I was going with the combat sandboxes are really cool in theory,
Yeah,
but in practice, a lot of them still rely on you taking a very specific path. Otherwise, you're going to have a horrible time trying
right.
to progress through the environment.
Just as an
Um,
example, like they have those boxes that you can sling a rock at to make a noise and distract guards. And for whatever reason, these boxes are placed nowhere near any of the guards.
or
So
it's not even.
it's just not even a relevant gameplay mechanic.
I wouldn't even say nowhere near the guards. But most of them were placed in areas where it's just completely useless.
Were
Like,
areas you have to go through in order to
yeah,
proceed.
if
Yeah.
if you okay, so I'm gonna distract a guard into a place that I have to move through, no matter what I do. Like even when he turns around to go back to his preset destin or his like preset location or whatever, like it still doesn't make it any more advantageous for me to go that route. Most of them you have to, and I think it's most egregious in like the very first level where you have to deal with guards. There's that
Yeah,
one door
because you
you have to
don't
get
have as
through.
many options at that point. That's
Yeah,
the other
and
thing is how slowly options are doled out across the game. Yeah.
yeah, and there's in that very first encounter, there's like a box full of metal shit that you can throw a rock into to lure a guard, but like no guard that goes there, it's not going to make the encounter any easier. It's not going to
Yeah.
give you any sort of advantage. So what's the point? Is it just there to trick me into thinking it might be useful? Because if so, fuck that. Like give me several different options that actually will be useful, and I can decide which ones work best for me and my play style. It
And
just
I mentioned Hitman earlier and how much I love, or I haven't played it since like Blood Money, which I think was PS2 still. But one of the great things about that series is if you fuck up the stealth, then you can engage in a shootout if you want. You'll get a terrible rating for the level, but you can
I
also
mean,
save at points, checkpoints.
Metal Gear's the same way too.
Yeah, and but the problem is that in this game, the actual direct combat options you have are so limited, and you're especially limited by resources. Like I was so excited to get a crossbow, and then I find out that like until the end of the game, you get a crossbow bolt like once every 45 minutes. You find one, and you find a dagger. I think I found a total of like 3 knives across the game, and
Yeah,
they're
well
just not. Or sorry, go on.
the idea with the knives is that it's a catch-22 resource, right?
Right.
You can either use it to take out a guard quietly and quickly, or you could use it to open a chest with more resources. It kind of acts like a key,
Like the shiv
as
in The
Yes.
Last of Us.
yeah, right,
Well, you
yeah.
bring up The Last of Us. See, why are they even breakable in the first place other than to limit your options? Because
Well,
in
that's
the
it.
last,
You just
in the,
answered your own
yeah,
question.
exactly. In The Last of Us, it makes sense because they're makeshift shivs. These are fucking medieval daggers. They don't just break
I
when you
guess
stab somebody
guess they were
unless
made
they're really
by
shitty. Yeah.
guess they were made by a shoddy blacksmith. I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you.
But
um,
yeah, it's just the option, and they limit you even further with the chemical ones. Like at one point, the guards, their lanterns start being protected from extinguish, which defeats the whole purpose of extinguish the
yeah, yeah.
powder that puts out the fires unless they're carrying a torch.
I'm not opposed to I actually really like the concept of each guard each guard is like a different enemy type, and they take different methods of things that you like, alchemical combinations or whatever. They take different approaches to taking them to all down. You can sling these ones in the head, and those are really simple. Some of them are carrying torches, and you got to extinguish the torches. And I think the breadth of options they give you is really cool and useful. um and it's just a unique approach to taking out guards and sneaking through an area. It's just my problem really comes down to how the areas are mostly designed, where
Yes,
one path is highly encouraged, and the rest you're just going to have a miserable time,
yes.
to the point where it's basically not a sandbox anymore.
Especially when enemies which like I guess it's somewhat quote unquote realistic, but like enemies can see you from literally across the entire. Like you won't even know an enemy's there. He's just a speck to you. But then all of a
Mhm.
sudden you see an alert thing as you're crawling through the grass.
Yeah.
So stealth is just annoying, and like again, it comes down to like resource management. So you talk about options, like at some point you get the option to light people on fire with the ignis, whatever it's called,
Ignifer.
ignifer. But you need a pot in order to do that. You can't just sling it at them. And pots again or something. If you want them in constant supply, you're gonna have to roam around these giant, poorly designed levels. It's and some of them can't be if they're specifically armored in specific ways that it doesn't make clear. And you need tar, and it just gets
Well,
confusing and muddled the options.
I do think that it's at least the resource management and acquiring the resources is a lot better than the first game, because the first game relied on you finding alchemical resources far too much, and that was like basically the only reason to go off the beaten path. And there wasn't much of a path to begin with in the first one. It was a very linear game. This tried to expand things a lot, but it still didn't have like a ton of resources in all these different corners that required you to go there. All the resources you needed were pretty much along the path you needed to take. You just needed to go
Yeah,
to them and pick them up. I think they reined that in and limited the options a little better in this game, so that the things that you found were not you weren't inundated with them, and they were actually more useful, in my opinion.
yeah. I never found myself running out of the actual chemicals. It was more the additional things I needed to make
Yeah,
those chemicals actually
like
effective.
like pots and stuff. I know what you're
Yeah,
saying, but I never felt like I was hurting for pots unless things were really going wrong.
uh,
And there were certain times where I did run out of them, and I'm like, man, I could really use a pot right now to throw some tar into and light these dudes on fire. But
yeah. I guess
um,
it just to me it says a lot that in what are supposed to be stealth sections, like when I got the option with Arnold, I was just like, all right, go fucking kill him. Let's go. I'll
Yeah.
sling guys. Like
yeah,
I didn't like it was just so much better than any other section.
yeah,
And
when
you
you
mentioned the first game. I don't remember the first game having as much direct stealth or action sequences. They had a few. The things
it was much more about stealth and just finding
and
efficient ways to sneak past dudes. Yeah.
and the puzzle sections like navigating I remember distinctly from the first game that battlefield with the
Hmm.
rats all
Oh
over. Like
yeah, I
that
love
was
that.
yeah, exactly. And those are the moments of gameplay that shine for me in this game. I like the puzzle sections for the most part when you're not dealing with enemy soldiers or stealth.
I
I
like the combat in this game. I just don't like the level design. Although the maps are gorgeous, like everything's breathtaking visually, I just don't like how open it was. I feel like it didn't work for this gameplay.
I totally agree. I
Yeah.
totally agree.
And when you
Um,
do get into combat, it feels janky to be quite frank.
Yeah.
I think the simplest way to sum this up is that Innocence was a stealth adventure.
Yes,
This is an action game with stealth, or
Yeah.
is trying to be a period action game with stealth.
when it should have just stuck to what it was in the first game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But speaking of the stealth, let's talk a little bit about the progression system,
How does it work? I
because
still don't understand.
yeah, so it kind of doesn't make any sense. Because it would imply that it rewards you for being stealthy, or rewards you for being bloodthirsty, or rewards you for being inventive. And in a way, two of those three things it indeed does. It's that third one that's just like, what? The one that rewards you for being inventive and gives you more like alchemical skills and stuff.
Hmm.
It's really only if you kill about half of the enemies in an area versus not that many or most of them.
Oh, so it's basically like an invisible scoring system from a Hitman game. They just don't actually tell you what the results
Right.
were.
So say an area has 6 guards in it. If you kill like 0 to 1 of them, if you kill no guards or 1 guard maybe, it'll give you experience toward your stealth skills. If you kill about like 2 to 4 of the enemies, you'll get experience toward the alchemical skills. And if you kill 5 or 6 of them, you get experience toward the super aggressive attack skills. And that's it. There's no more thinking to it. It's like if you really come up with some really cool or interesting ideas using alchemy and using your materials and stuff, and kill all of the guards that way, versus like if you don't touch your sling at all and you just kill everyone with alchemy, it's all going to go toward aggressive and not
Yeah,
toward
that's
the
what happened to
alchemical
me.
ones.
I specifically was avoiding stealth because I thought like I had to wait till I leveled up to up my stealth meter to make me more quiet. I
Yeah.
was just nuking everybody and rushing
Yeah.
through levels, and I was like, "Wait, do I level up? How does this work?"
All things considered, it's a little nonsensical because it's just it's like why am I being rewarded in aggression when all I was trying to do was use my materials in the most effective way possible.
Right.
um I if I want experience there, it's just it's not really coming through that way. It's just it all comes down to, in a given area there's this many enemies, how many of them did you kill, and
Mm,
allocate experience appropriately. It really doesn't make any sense.
mm.
um could be a really cool progression system. It rewards you based on how you play, if only it was rewarding you based on how you play in the correct way.
I mean, at the very least, explain it to the player how
Yeah.
it works at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they offer just a very basic surface level explanation that really doesn't play into
I don't even remember it.
it.
I mean,
um
that also goes to the upgrades. Um, they only tell you how much it costs when you don't have enough. So if you do have enough, I can't
I
like
no,
Mm,
it does tell you.
see.
It's just a very bright yellow number, so it's very hard to see against the white background. I know what you're talking about, Jason. I definitely see why you would think they don't tell you
Oh, I
how
thought
much
it
you
was just
need.
telling me what I had. I didn't realize that was the cost.
No, there's something. I think there's the amount you have and the amount you need right next to one
Only when
another.
you don't have enough. When you do have enough, it shows a gold number. I just was under the assumption that
Oh, okay.
the gold number it was showing me was um what it cost to do. I didn't realize that was how much I had.
I think it's how much it costs. But anyway, I do think this upgrade system is a lot more boring than the first one.
Oh yeah.
I'll go ahead and say that. The interesting thing about upgrading your stuff in the first one was it used the same materials that you needed to craft. So you have to make the decision of weighing the options. Do I use this leather to craft a thing, or do I use this leather to upgrade a thing?
yeah.
There's also
Um
the problem that the perks, you're basically doing the first two levels of each one to get to the last one because you don't really feel any noticeable impact on gameplay until you have the. So, for instance, I perfected the crossbow so I could retrieve bolts. So by
yeah.
the end of the game, I'm just running around shooting guys, getting my bolts back, shooting guys, and it's kind of the same for each of the ones where the major upgrade doesn't really come until the end. Which, when you say it in words, makes sense.
Yeah.
But like when your first two options really don't impact the game that much.
But it's like you go to 0 to 0 to 0 to 100
Yeah,
is
yeah.
essentially what you're saying. I get that. I feel like they were just, if anything, they were just a little imbalanced. The first thing I upgraded was the one where it negates tools. Because to me that made the most sense to start with. Okay, if I get to that, I no longer have to rely on needing a tool to upgrade. Um, so I focused that down first, and then I was able to just recycle tools as more parts. But again, it's a boring upgrade system. It's very generic, and you're not making any interesting decisions other than, do I upgrade this or that?
Mm.
The first game relying on the same materials used for crafting, and those are relatively finite. I think that was a lot. You had to make smart decisions there. You couldn't just do it frivolously.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I think that was I think that was a little bit of a letdown, to say the
Yeah,
least.
I think it's also worth pointing out. Delilah said it multiple times about this one being too long, and I think that's ultimately when comparing it to the original. One of the problems is that a lot of these gameplay issues might have existed in the first one, and we just didn't know because the game, like you said, Mark, was more about the stealth and adventure rather than the action or these giant, sandbox arenas that you have to stealth your way or
It
kill your way
also
through.
the first one rewarded you to explore with more resources, whereas this one felt like you were wasting more resources if you explore.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the increased length of this game as compared to the first one, because this one is like what 17 to 25 hours, or is it the first one's like less than 10 hours?
It's like I think the first one was like, yeah, like 10 to 12. This one's more like 16 to 18.
Yeah, so you double the playtime and you start noticing all these things that may have very well been in the first one. It just wasn't as obvious because you're more focused on the story and the puzzles and the adventure and the set pieces.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I mean, let's talk a bit about the exploration. Because I did on my first playthrough of this game, when you get to, what was it, chapter 10, where it's like a big open area on Lacuna. My first impression of that was, wow, this is actually kind of cool. Um, because mostly because I expected there to be more things to go and find. There really
Hmm.
wasn't a lot to find.
No, it's just like side items, like feathers and whatnot, where you get one or two lines of dialogue, like, "Oh, Hugo will love this feather," and then
Uh,
it's like, "Oh, you collected a thing."
yeah, and what did you guys think of the main collectible being those souvenirs, but they're really just like moments. I don't know why they called them souvenirs.
Way
Um
less cool than the flowers in the first one.
yeah, I mean, we had feathers though. Like, does it isn't that basically the
Eh,
same?
eh.
Let's be real. It's just so that there's a trophy there, another one for you guys to get that platinum, because I know
I
you
mean,
guys are all about that.
I think my favorite thing about the souvenirs was the art that was generated from the moment, right? It was
Oh,
like
the sketches, yeah.
the sketch of the characters in that moment. I thought that was really really cool.
And that artwork was it was very reminiscent of, like, if anybody listening is familiar with Alan Lee, he's not the only, but he's the most famous guy who did art for Tolkien for like covers and in page art and stuff like that. He's kind of what everybody associates those drawings. It was kind of very reminiscent of those kinds of sketches and looked good. I was surprised it wasn't more like prominently placed in the game. Yeah,
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, that was the best. That was the main reason to seek those out. Other than the ones that were that actually had involvement. You know, like you're walking through like a fair and there's a little game for you to play where you just have to throw rocks at some cups or something. You know, something along those lines where you're actually a little involved. Those were good. Anything else, like I was just doing it for the sketches because they looked really nice, but the moment was like, look, Lucas, we found some silk.
Hugo will love this.
um Other than that, like the chapter I mentioned, chapter 10, the open world section in on Lacuna, there was that windmill puzzle that, like, I still don't really know how you're supposed to find the solution, because I think you find these etchings on rocks around the entire island, but they're not particularly eye-catching landmarks to go find. So, am I supposed to run around this whole section looking for clues on how to solve this puzzle? And the reward is something that makes it so I recover a little faster.
It's funny you
Um,
said that because I didn't even realize there was a mini puzzle to solve with those
yeah,
windmills. I just ran right past them.
and it's not even required for a trophy or anything. It's something that
Yeah,
if you want to
it's
seek it out and figure it out, you can.
it's kind of like the goat that is trapped, and you have to burn the grass to get in to free it when you're with
Well, that
Sophia.
well, that's for a souvenir.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying though. It's an optional thing. Like there's just
Yeah,
some dialogue with it.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is. But at least the souvenirs are tied to trophies. That whole windmill puzzle is just totally independent, and
I see. Okay.
it's something that, there's no necessary incentive, and it's not like the benefit you get from it is like super game changing. Which in a way I appreciate. It's just the way you come to that solution, I'm just not sure was particularly well thought out.
Right.
Delilah, do you remember doing that? Did you do that puzzle?
I was in windmills a lot. I don't remember if I did a puzzle though. Because I
You
did it.
can
I
just.
played this on Xbox, so I didn't 100% it.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't 100% on an Xbox either. I did for the PlayStation Plat though.
I just find it funny how many things in this game you forget are a thing. Like a whole mechanic, like the pyrite. I only had pyrite once in the entire game when they give it to you as part of the story. I never found
Right,
it
and
once
it's
in
meant,
the
and that's meant to just be a get out of jail
get a
free
jail
card,
free
right?
card. Yeah, yeah,
But like, yeah, I would say overall, there's not a ton that's memorable about this game. Like, I played it right after it came out last year. And when I went to replay it, I really forgot a lot. The only thing I remembered really was the ending.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I didn't even remember the modern day baby thing. I totally forgot about that. Um
Yeah.
yeah, there's just not a lot that to remember about this game.
And it was nominated for Game of the Year.
Yeah, well, when if we want to go a little meta, let me pull up that list of game nominees. I mean, there was for last year's Game of the Year, and when we say Game of the Year, we're talking strictly Keeley's Game Awards. It was up for nomination by at other outlets, but it's just easier to only talk about Keeley's because that's probably the biggest production. But last year's nominees were Elden Ring, A Plague Tale Requiem, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Stray, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3. That Game of the Year debate was only between two of those six games.
Yes.
And arguably there were other, I mean, there were other games that I would have considered better and more innovative than any of those six that came out last year, but um as far as the general populace, as far
What,
as
Live
the wide,
Alive?
I mean, we want to talk about a 1994 Square RPG. I'd gladly do that with you guys, you know. Wink wink nudge nudge. Um no, I'm thinking of Tunic, to be just to
Ah,
be blunt.
Mm.
Tunic was really special. In a way that I didn't feel Elden Ring came quite close to. Go listen to our Elden Ring episode.
Yeah,
oh,
very Tunic. I mean, I haven't played it yet. I do plan to. It's on my backlog of things I definitely want to play. But
I
from what I've
J-
seen,
Jason,
far more far
I
more
genuinely
creative
think
than
you will
this
love
game.
that game. Yeah, I
No, I
genuinely
know.
think you will love that game.
It's on my backlog of things I will definitely play at some point.
Yeah.
But from what
But
I've seen, far more creative than anything in this game.
my but the point I bring up with Delilah, you mentioning it being a Game of the Year nominee, is that it was a pity nomination. And
Yes, spoiler alert. This when we get to the Kwasnicky rating, this is going to be a sub 5 rating. Like, so I
oh
didn't
boy.
even realize this was nominated for Game of the Year, and I'm amazed that it was.
It's
yeah.
because, yeah, it was a, and you know, not to discredit Asobo entirely, like, it's incredible that they're a pretty a comparatively smaller studio, and they have now made two games that look as good as this game does, you know?
Yeah.
Like Plague Tale Innocence, Plague Tale Requiem, they are gorgeous. It's incredible what they're able to pull off.
Hmm.
They really look good.
Hmm.
Super cutting edge for the studio that's behind them. It's just it's a really pretty picture on a rocky foundation. And I don't know where they're gonna go from here, which is my setup for the final question. Unless there's anything else you guys want to talk about before we go into the final question.
No.
No.
Pretty game, sure. Cool ending.
Yeah,
That's
I
all it
think
had
we're all
going
pretty
for it.
much in agreement of the many failings of the game and where we thought it had potential and could have been much better
Yeah.
with
I
the proper
definitely
setup.
like the Plague Tale Innocence a lot more as a whole.
Yeah,
I
it
think
was a
I
better
think
all-rounded product. Yeah.
end to end it was a cleaner, more consistent experience for sure than this one was.
Yeah, and I mentioned towards the beginning, the first game was all grounded and anchored down. All of the world building and crazy magic rat shit was anchored around, a story of a sister coming to appreciate her brother and adopt the responsibility for him. There was
Mm.
nothing really like that here to anchor this, so it just felt like and it was twice as long, so you're just kind of wandering around from place to place for reasons that don't really make sense when you think about them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my final question is, do you guys even want to see another game? And if so, would you want it to be Amicia laying the foundation for what comes in the future, or do you want them to just totally upend the setting of medieval France and just go do something wild and wacky with this whole idea and do like a modern day fictional story and continue from that post credit scene.
I
Delilah.
feel like if they want to tell a story, they should. And I think that it could go interesting angles. Like, I can vibe with the idea of seeing breadcrumbs from Amicia but playing as a different protagonist or whatever. That sounds cool. But if we're just dealing with the same idea where the ultimate goal is to just kill the kid who's causing the shit, then it's like, how much further can we take this, without it becoming more messy than it already is?
I mean, it could be, it could almost be like what Metal Gear Solid 2 pulled, right? Kojima wanted to make a game where you see Snake through someone else's eyes. So make a game where you see Amicia through someone else's eyes.
Hey kid, my
And
name is Iroquois Amelia.
Amicia, you mean? Did I say Amelia
No,
before?
no. I said Amelia because she wouldn't use Amicia because that's her actual name.
Oh,
It's
okay,
Iroquois
okay.
Pliskin, reference to
Yeah.
Snake Plissken from Escape from
Uh-huh.
New York.
Yeah, we know. Um yeah, like what if the whole angle is they jump the series several centuries later, so that the angle instead of having to kill the macula carrier, instead of having to kill the plague, so to speak, it's to use modern medicine um to find a cure and end it once and for all. Like maybe that's the angle they try to go for with another game. And who knows, like they could even try to contrive that like the people involved in this third game are descendants of Amicia, so they can still keep it tied into the family we've been following for 2 games. I'm not saying that's the best approach, but what if that's what they do? I don't
Or
think there's anything implying that Basilius and Aelia are in any way descendants of Amicia and Hugo, but
I mean, going off of what Delilah said, I don't want to see another sequel to this for the very reason that Amicia is only interesting insofar as her relationship with Hugo.
mhm. Yeah,
And
that's kind of why I don't think they would do another game with Amicia,
well,
because what are they gonna do with her?
what I was going to add was I would also just knowing that this studio is like you were saying, Mark, this relatively small studio is capable of some pretty amazing technical things. I would rather see them branch out and do something completely different and
yeah,
flex their creative muscles because that usually is a great remedy for
Jason,
what I think is an inferior follow up.
Jason, we're
But
not talking about Remedy. We're talking about Asobo.
oh, good call.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a really bad joke.
Yeah, I know. But
I also do want to say,
realistically, we're going to see another Plague Tale because sequels sell better. That's just the reality of markets.
yeah, I just think there's an opportunity here to do something interesting with the series while also changing it up in a significant way. It's just is it going to be sort of a grandfather's axe paradox where it's everything's different but the name, if they do a modern
right.
setting and change up the gameplay significantly, because I doubt anyone modern day is going to be using a crossbow and sling as their only weapons. Is it still going to maintain that same identity?
Yeah.
And it
So
goes back to what Delilah said. How do you drag it out unless they significantly change the lore of the way
Yeah.
the macula works?
yeah,
Like, I don't want to see another modern day Amicia protect a modern day Hugo. Like, maybe Hugo like unleashes shit and he's just a dick and like becomes like this big powerful
He's
rat
basically
wielding asshole.
Dudley from Harry Potter with the macula. Yeah,
Yeah, that would be more interesting. And then you have to like kill your own brother, but like because he's an asshole, not because
actually
you
make
have
him
to.
antagonistic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something different,
a Plague Tale 3 Face Off.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like we all have wildly different viewpoints on where this could or maybe even should go, which I don't think happens very often. So, it's just interesting. So I hope you listeners enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah.
All right. Do you guys have anything else to add before we wrap this bad boy up?
No.
I guess just the Kwasnicky rating.
All right. It's time for the Kwasnicky rating. Lay it on us, Jason.
4.5.
Wow.
Mainly just because it is a very pretty game. Even though I did have a lot of crashes on the game and technical issues, it is very pretty and it is impressive. Kind of what they can do with the facial animations and the voice acting. Which even though I felt like the first one they tried a bit more to add a bit of a French accent here, it's pretty much just straight up. I might just be misremembering the first game. Here it's just kind of straight up British. It's kind of funny to hear Cockney British accents talking about killing Englishmen, but whatever.
We totally forgot to talk about the spin-off game where Amicia and Hugo were going by the names Jill and Joshua. Totally forgot to bring that one up. But
I didn't even know there was a spin-off game.
No, there isn't. I'm talking about because Jesus Christ.
Was I
Jason.
not listening? Did I just miss something? Oh, Jill and Joshua as in
yeah, they're the same voice actors.
Also,
oh shit,
as children, they're the same voice actors.
Yeah, okay.
All right, Delilah, what were you saying?
No, I was just gonna say, just like every other kid in Final Fantasy 16 was Amicia or Hugo.
Yeah, go listen to our Final Fantasy 16 episode.
Hey, plugs
I'm plugging the whole Reap the Spoils library on this episode. Gotta respect the hustle. So 4.5 Kwasnicky rating. You heard it here,
10,
folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4.5 out of 10.
And it's important that folks keep in mind 5 is average.
Yeah. We you're a long-time Reap the Spoils listener. I'm sure you know that by now. All right, Delilah, you got anything you want to plug?
Oh, I've been playing Armored Core 6 on my channel on YouTube /Assassina-san. I think that's it. But I'm not playing the whole game, just the bosses at the end of each chapter.
Okay.
It's a really good game.
Yeah.
I like it. It rules.
Go watch Delilah play stream. I watched her Final Fantasy streams and it was extremely entertaining.
Is there a boss in Armored Core 6 called Mechlania?
No, but there is a Mech Melania.
Oh, so there is a Mechlania, basically.
That's not the name, but basically, yeah. I actually just fought a boss that had a similar moveset to Melania and had like that aesthetic. I don't know. It was like a vibe.
So was there a waterfowl dance?
Basically, yeah.
So there was a huge missed opportunity there from Software to call it Mechlania.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Hire me from Software, just saying. I'll name all your bosses really bad Souls puns.
Is there a dung eater?
There is not a dung eater.
There's an oil eater. A crude oil eater. I'm not even gonna once again, we're on what was formerly known as Twitter, but I'm not even using it really at all anymore, and it's depressing. If you liked this episode, if you're listening on YouTube, thank you very much. Please be sure to like the episode, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment, tell us what you thought of this game. Were we too harsh on it? We'd like to know. We'd really, we're not gonna pull punches. We're not gonna do that here at Reap the Spoils. We never do pull punches. So, do you think we were too hard on this game? Just shoot us a comment and let us know. Be sure to share the episode with your friends, your family, your pets, your kids. Maybe not your kids. Hopefully your kids don't have the macula. That would be a huge
Kill them
shame.
if they do.
That'd be disconcerting.
Get an abortion.
Jesus.
Wow.
We don't need any.
Damn, man, Delilah just got more savage than I've ever gotten on this show.
She got more savage than Amicia did in this game. Heyo. If you
we can't use enough.
We need to clip that and have that like on a sound, like some virtual soundboard for whenever somebody or Delilah goes savage or I go savage. It's just like it's cue for that comment.
Man, that was
no context.
Exactly, that's the point. We'll turn you into a meme yet, Delilah.
I'm gonna get so canceled.
If you listen to this episode on Apple Podcasts, thank you very much. please rate and review the show. 5 stars preferred. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you didn't like. Seriously, liking, rating, reviewing, commenting, it really, really helps us, guys. So we really appreciate when you do it. So and yeah, spread the good word. Share the show with whoever you think would like it. Jason, what's the next game we're playing?
I am super excited to announce that we are going to be doing Dead Space, or I guess more precisely, the recent remake.
I mean,
Um,
you guys know I'm gonna
well,
be fucking wild and play the original
Yeah,
as
I
well as
played
the
the
remake.
original recently too, so I could talk on
well,
it.
I'm
Oh,
very
sweet.
excited for this because I played the original when it came out. However, I never finished it. So
It
I'm
holds up.
basically going to be I know I'm familiar with the game and how it plays in the beginning, but I never actually beat it to the end. So this will actually be my first time playing the entire story. So I'm
And
excited.
that's the same for me. I didn't play it when it came out. I did play like 2 hours of it. God, the early 2010s or so,
This is
and
a long time ago, yeah.
I never finished it. So, and it's funny for as big on survival horror as the three of us are, really. It is
And
kind of
for me, space. You all know how I feel about
yeah.
Alien. Go listen to
Oh
our
yeah, I
Alien
mean,
Isolation podcast.
me too. Alien's one of my favorite movies of all time, so it's kind of strange that I never did go back and
Right.
play Dead Space, even though I wouldn't say they're completely or even that much similar. Um, it's just the survival horror aspect. It is
Hmm.
a seminal survival horror franchise in the modern day, and yet it's kind of slipped me by. It's clearly slipped you by too, Jason. Delilah, out of curiosity, did you play all 3 Dead Space games before?
I never played the third one.
Okay.
I
Yeah, I
did
just know
play
you're
Dead
supposed to
Space
stay
1 and
away from
2.
the third one.
I
That's all I
started
know.
playing it and then I don't know. Maybe
Hmm.
I will.
Okay. Okay. Well, tune in next month for Dead Space. It's gonna be our October spooky month episode. Um
That game also rules. You gotta play it. It's so
yeah.
good.
No, I know. I played a significant portion. I don't know why I
Oh,
never
sorry.
went
By
back to
you, I
finish
meant
it.
like everyone, like the
Yeah,
audience,
yeah, yeah. Oh,
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
world, the universe.
I'm sorry. I'm a bit of narcissism. Sorry, folks.
No, absolutely. If you haven't played Dead Space, join us next month for Dead Space. Again, it'll probably focus on more the remake, the modern remake than the original, but I kind of want to have both angles, so gonna play both of them time permitting. And yeah, tune in next month. We'll see you then. Thanks
Bye.
for listening.
See you next time, folks.